Welcome to the War in Heaven podcast. I am Austin Hepworth. I'm here along with Michael Hepworth. And today we're talking about a topic that perhaps isn't super fun to think about, but in some ways it's actually really empowering to realize the extent to which we may be involved in what takes place in the world. And the title of today's topic is Maybe It's Me. We say this because in our world today, we are very quick often to place blame and point fingers at others. But I want to share a couple quick stories to kind of lay the foundation for some of what we're talking about today. And this ties very strongly into the notion that we are creators, children of a creative being. And as such, we're given power to actually shape the world around us. So when the world is a certain way, it's helpful to stop and say, maybe it's me. What if I contributed to this in some way, form, or fashion? And so there's a story I love. It's a joke. I hope it's not true, but it's a story of a man. He leaves for work one morning, a typical day, and his wife turns on the morning news as she's doing, cleaning up around the house or whatnot. And she notices on the news that they're reporting a wrong way driver on the freeway, and this is the freeway he usually takes to work. And so she calls him up on the cell phone, pretty worried about him, and says, "Hey, honey, I just want you to know the news says there's one wrong way driver driving down the freeway, so watch out." And the husband says, confused, back to her, one wrong way driver, there's hundreds of them. And in this, I've often wondered how often we may not realize our true position or where we're at. Another example is, this one's a true story. I worked with a man, and he had been divorced, and over time he eventually married again, and he married someone from a completely different culture, from a completely different religion, very opposite to the religion of his first marriage, very opposite to the culture of his first marriage. And he was trying very hard to, I guess, maybe get to a different spot or have a different situation. And after some time of being married, he told me, he goes, "Yeah," he says, "I used to think that all the problems that my first wife talked about were all her things and her issues." He goes, "But I married someone completely opposite, completely different culture, completely different religion, everything. And she's saying all the same things that my first wife said." He said, "In other words, I'm starting to realize maybe it's me." And as I reflected on that, I thought, well, that's again, it can be a little disheartening to consider if we've contributed to something we don't like or we don't want. But I think it's also helpful to realize, to what extent do we impact the world around us? How far out do we shape what's taking place? And when I look at American politics right now and the leaders that we've elected in the last, I don't know, I've probably been really thinking about these things for the last 12, 16 years or so. We've gotten to a place where people consistently ask the question, how did we get here? Is there really no one better than these two candidates for this position? Or why do we have, all the different types of leaders that we have now? Some very boisterous, some very loud, some very mean, some are very kind. There's this very interesting spread of leaders that are out there. And when I look at it, it's interesting to look through the lens and ask, maybe it's me, or what if it's us? What if these leaders are a reflection of something inside of us? And they make it to the top because ultimately we as a people have to choose them. We give them power, we give them a voice by those we select. And so why are we selecting people that, if they truly don't align with anything within us, why are we selecting them? And as I reflect on this and I think, well, what is it that different leaders, different political leaders, different other types of leaders, what are they reflecting inside of us? What are we demanding? If you make some comparisons to people that may be kind compared to those that may be mean as leaders, we may start to see why some may go one way or the other. One random example from the sports world, BYU football this year had a run where they went undefeated for quite a bit of the season until towards the very end, and they lost 2 games towards the very end of the season. And they were ranked very high for a time, but then lost these 2 games. And the head coach spoke very highly of the other teams when they lost, and talked about how good they were and different things. And there were people that commented openly online that were upset by this and said, well, this doesn't, inspire your team. You need to be more fiery. You need to call out these other teams, do different things. And there are other teams that do that. There was an experience where BYU played University of Utah. It's a heated rivalry. There was some reffing calls at the very end of the game that some people argue changed the course of the game. Some people argue they were correct. But there was heat and disagreement over it. At the end of the game, though, the University of Utah athletic director was very heated and really called out the refs, called out the Big 12, really dished out a lot of criticism. And there were some people, again, that were opposed to that, but there are others that supported it as well. And then we have things like, this is a sad situation, of course, with the killing of the United Healthcare CEO. And you look at that and you read the different things going on. There's a lot of people openly talking about how they support in some way or another what this killer did, because healthcare is a joke or it's broke or different things. And there's even a GoFundMe where people are donating to the alleged murderers legal defense fund. And of course, I'm not saying that's all of America. I'm not pretending that, because there's many people speaking out against the murderer and in support of the healthcare CEO. And then there's some maybe that are torn. I don't know. I'm not pretending to label everyone where they stand on each of these things. But the point is that inside of us, we start to project something. We start to contribute to something that has a spirit, or that we're giving it a voice when we speak about it, when we give money to it, when we give attention to it. And different leaders arise that imitate these spirits or these movements or these things that they're picking up on. And so ultimately we can start to look to our leaders that we're electing and recognize they may be a reflection of us. There may be something going on in us that's pushing our leaders to become more angry or more mean, or some of them more kind, or some, less critical. There's forces at work, and people will respond to those. And so to me, when we talk about the war in heaven, we talk about our creative power. It begs the question, what power and influence do we have over our country, over our world, over our society? Are we truly unable to make a difference? Or do we contribute in some way or another to these things? And is it me? Am I a part of the reason why things are the way they are? Now, I'm not pretending that any one of us can change everything. And I'm not suggesting that one of us holds the power to just change everything. But are we contributing good? Are we contributing bad? Are we feeding the wrong thing? What are we doing? And I think it's a very important question for us to ask. So Michael, I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts either on any of the stories we shared or any stories you want to share, or things we talk about as we start discussing this concept of, is it me?
Yeah, and I agree with your thought that it's not one of us that's going to change everything, and that kind of power isn't contained in a single person, but you can change something. And you can change things around you. It takes effort, it takes energy, but it's something we know, and we don't always like to think about it because we don't want to take responsibility about those things. Thomas Sowell once said that we seem to be getting closer and closer to a situation where nobody is responsible for what they did, but we are all responsible for what somebody else did. So we like to take away our own responsibility for the things that we do, because taking responsibility, it's a hard thing to do. It's acknowledging your own weaknesses, your own deficiencies, some choices you made wrong. But we do like solutions. And so when somebody does something wrong or something goes wrong, we like to think we have the solution. We like to point fingers. And I think going back to your sports examples, sports is one that always interests me. I like sports. I like watching sports. I like playing sports. But I'm always interested in people's behavior surrounding referees. When a game is close and a referee makes a call at the end, it's impossible for them to make the right call in everybody's eyes. Some people will say they shouldn't have made the call. Some people say they should make the call, and that it's just a consistent disagreement. And it's interesting that not 100%, but the argument usually is on the lines of which side you're rooting for. People that have no really stake in the game aren't really heated about the calls, and then those that wanted a certain team to win or not usually get more frustrated. And it's interesting that we require of a referee a level of performance that we don't seem to require of our own team that we're rooting for. So the team that you're rooting for will play an entire game and they will make many mistakes. If it's a basketball game, they'll turn the ball over. They will miss shots. They will foul when they shouldn't foul. They will not follow their defense assignment 100% of the time. They will make mistakes, guaranteed. Even the best players do it. And we allow for that. And then we say at the very end of the game, the referee isn't allowed to have a mistake. They have to be absolutely perfect. And so I look at that as a reflection of our team is us. When we look at our sports team, we are one and the same with our sports team. People talk about the team they like as though it's them. They'll say, we won this weekend. They didn't play at all, but their team won, and so they feel like that they won. And so I can't take responsibility for my team's poor decisions. I got to blame it on somebody. Instead of saying maybe it's me. You get into a heated game, ref makes a call and you lose. Very few people who are cheering for the team said, yeah, we threw an interception early in the game. We missed the blocking assignment halfway through, missed the defensive assignment to let them get a touchdown. Those kind of conversations don't happen. It's all about, given all that other stuff, what did the referees get wrong? And so to your point, I think it's easier to look around us and try to throw that responsibility to somebody else, because the question of maybe it's me is a hard one. It's to acknowledge our own deficiencies, and that can be scary, that can be hard. But the importance of that is, to your point, that's how we start to make changes. Because if all we ever do is say every problem around me is somebody else's problem, and it's something that we have a power to change, we'll never change it because we didn't acknowledge that we had a power to change it. So this thing that's really frustrating us, that we want to blame on somebody else, is something that we have the power to change, but we refuse to look at ourselves. We just look at everybody else. We say somebody else needs to take care of this. So that thing will never get changed. You don't have the power to change everything, but you certainly have a lot of a power to change the things around you. And as you work to look at yourself and say, what can I change around me? That creates an environment where other people can do the same thing. If somebody comes to you and they talk about the things that they're working on in their own lives, I find people are more receptive to conversations about those kinds of things than they are when they come to you and say, I need you to change all these things in your life. You're not as willing. Somebody comes to you and say, these are all the things you're doing wrong. You just want to disagree with them. If they come to you and say, these are all the things that I'm doing wrong, I'm trying to improve on these things, you want to join me in these efforts to improve and get better. It's an easier conversation to have. So I guess what I'm getting at there is the maybe it's me conversation is tough, but it empowers you because it allows you to see those things around you that you can actually change, that you couldn't see before because you didn't acknowledge that there were any deficiencies.
Yeah, and I heard one time someone talking about church. They were talking about how just people criticize church or saying, yeah, the speakers are bad, or the pastor was boring or whatever. And this church leader at the time said, well, anytime you hear anything in church, you should ask the question, is it me? To what extent are they talking about me? And what do I need to do to change? Because it's a fascinating thing. But if you think about when you've heard any type of message directed to say, oh, someone's at fault, somebody did this wrong. Our minds instantly go to, oh yeah, I know someone that needs to hear this. So-and-so could really benefit from this message. Oh, I wish that they were here hearing this. It's just what they need to get corrected type thing. And if that's what our minds are doing when there's principles being discussed, then we're missing the whole point. We go to church to improve ourselves and our relationship with God, not to think of all the people that need to hear a message. And when I started realizing the question in church should always be, is it me? How is this appearing in my life? It's an interesting one because in church, we're given a weekly opportunity to change the trajectory of our life, meaning the course we're traveling. Church should be a wake-up call to say, ooh, I've done something wrong this week. I need a change. And we should be able to look back at church every week and say, does my life have course corrections in them that shift my path because I recognize something that I needed to change and work on? And the peace that I feel that God gave us, and again, this goes back to the very intense agency battle in the war in heaven. Satan didn't like that people had the power to impact the world around them, to literally shift the course of the future through decisions that are made. And this is a creative power. The power to shape our future is in our hands. And we can sit there and go, oh, I can't do anything. There's too many starfish on the beach. I'm not going to throw any back. And to your point, Michael, it's, well, are we doing what we can? Are we doing something? And to the belief the little boy had when he's throwing the starfish back, and the old man says, what are you doing, boy? There's no way you can save all these starfish. And he looked defiantly at the old man and says, well, I saved that one, and throws it into the sea. And I think about that, and I think, how powerful is that mindset to be able to say, sure, I can't change everything, but I saved that one. And I think about this in healthcare, for example. EMTs ride around in ambulances, they come out, they can't save everybody. They're not out trying to reach every sick person in the world. They don't take that responsibility on. They take on the responsibility within certain hours, certain times to go out, learn the skills necessary to save people. And they go to the ones they can. And they don't sit there and live in shame and guilt that they can't save every person in the world. They trust that there's others working as well. And I look at that and I say, what if we each just started doing our part and living that way to say, you know what? Maybe politics has a culture we don't like. Well, to what extent is that me? To what extent have I put forth the wrong spirit with it? To what extent have I fed things? To what extent have I voted for people that I probably shouldn't have? And maybe I'm the only one that stops voting for them. But am I willing to change that? Am I willing to make a change to bring about something different? Because right now, even though I feel really out of touch with the president or my senator, I still vote for them. And meaning, I'm not saying I voted for every current president or senator, just meaning I vote for that position. And my vote in some realm is contributing to something. And if I start to vocalize and demand something different, or say something different, or communicate something in a different spirit, I can start to shape something different. And ultimately, I believe very strongly that the leaders we select will embody the things that we have started to desire and aim for. And as we start to do something and desire it, it can feed that desire and that motivation in others too. Others will start to desire it as well. And people, again, often go, I don't want to wait 20 years for this to happen. And I think, so you just never want it to happen? I mean, you want it now? It took more than 20 years for things to get bad and get to where they're at. So why aren't you willing to start working for something that's 20 years out? There's a lot of future after 20 years. There's a lot to leave your children, a lot to leave your grandchildren. And if you're willing to have that faith and work, that's the aspect of becoming a creator like God. Following up a little bit on what we talked about last time. The future is not set. I think that's one of the greatest epiphanies I ever had in my life, is that the future is not set. There are some things that will happen, such as the sun will come up again, right? We're moving around the sun, the earth spins. But even those things we know, well, at some point we could reach a black hole. There's no guaranteeing that all of this continues on the way it is. But just realizing, looking at groups like the Founding Fathers, looking at groups like those with the Magna Carta that fought against the king, they changed the course of this world by not accepting the notion that the future was set. They believed that something different could be done, and they worked for it. And they recognized that they fed the society and system around them, and they chose to feed something different, and things changed. And to me, that's a recognition of the intense power and the divinity that rests within us, as we are cloaked with and given the capacity to change the course of the future, to change the course of our existence. And that's a very liberating and empowering thing, and it can be scary for some. But ultimately, the notion that we can influence things and shape things is it's extremely gratifying to be a creator, to be able to do something good for the world. And this is something that it's one reason why parenthood can be so fulfilling if you approach it through the right lens. You're creating and shaping something, and sure, you don't fully control it. The child will have its agency and do what it wants to as well. But as parents, we get the deep satisfaction of being a creator, not just in the sense of creating a physical body, but also in the sense of shaping the child's spirit, the child's mind, the child's personality. These are things that take place as we create, and that same aspect can extend forth into so much of the world around us. And Michael, curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, along the same lines, Jordan Peterson once said that every word we speak constitutes reality. Every word that comes from our mouths tilts the world towards heaven or hell. And I think that's true with our words, that's true with our actions. We have more power over circumstances around us than we care to admit sometimes. We're constantly creating with what we say and with what we do. Our thoughts lead to these things. And so if we're aware and conscious of this, we can willfully create. We could say, what are we trying to achieve? We'll change our thoughts and our actions to align with that. Unconsciously, we tend to build the things we want, the things we desire. And by that, I mean, maybe not the picture of utopia you have in your head, but if your desire is to be left alone and to do your own thing, your actions follow that desire. You stay home, you watch your Netflix, you do whatever it takes. You want this certain kind of life, your actions are going to follow that. Even when the immediate actions don't align with a long-term future that has that, if in the moment what you want is to not do anything, then you won't do anything. Even if in the future, let's say that you really desire to be in better shape, you want to run a 5-minute mile or something, but more than that desire to run a 5-minute mile, right now at this moment you just desire to take a nap. You're going to take a nap. And so we tend to follow our desires as they exist in us right now. And if we can't take those desires and point them to something farther into the future that we're trying to create, then we're just left with a world where we're not creators. We're just reacting to those around us who may be creating. We're just trying to live in the moment, and that involves no future outlook. That involves no real creation. That just involves reacting to things that other people create. And so our desires really shape what we do. And it's our deep desires, again, not the picture you have in your head, not the daydream, but it's what you're feeling in the moment. That desire is going to shape what you do. And so if you don't point those desires, control those desires, then there probably won't be much of a creation at all, because it takes a dedicated desire and will towards something in order for this creation to happen. Otherwise, there's just chaos. I'm saying what I feel I want to say in the moment. I have no thought beyond that. I'm doing what I want to do in the moment. I have no thought beyond that. So many times when we look at the world around us and we see things we dislike, see laws we don't like, we see political leaders we don't appreciate, Maybe we live in a neighborhood where things aren't the way we would like them to be. It takes effort to change that, and most of the time our desire is, well, I don't want to expend any extra effort, and so we don't do anything about it. So that comes back to how do we need to look into ourselves and say, maybe it's me, maybe I have the power, maybe if I attune my desires appropriately, I can go out and make a change in my neighborhood. There's these things that are happening, and maybe I can make a difference. It's we look at politics, we look at our communities, and we like to say that we talk about the big unit as though it's an entity. The state of Arizona chose this. The state of California feels this way. Your city has this policy, but that all comes from individual actions, individual people with their desires doing different things. And it might feel like you're trying to stem the tide of a flood with a picket fence or something, but unless you're standing and doing something, then there will be no change at all. You can definitely guarantee there will be no change. So it comes down to individuals. The actions of many individuals together make the change. And if you're not starting, if you're not changing your desires, checking to yourself, saying maybe it's me, why would your neighbor do it? Why would anybody else do it? Why would you look to somebody else when it's something that's in your power, in your purview?
Yeah, and I like the example in my mind to understand some of what you're talking about of I always desire to have a nice, just to be healthy. I don't want to be, I want to be able to just go run and do some sports when I want to do them and things. I want to be able to lift heavier objects when the neighbor needs help or when we buy a new piece of furniture or whatever. But I rarely want the work that goes into having that. And I have competing desires inside me. And whenever I want help, there's a part of me that wants the ice cream too. And whenever I want to have a strong, active body, there's a part of me that wants to just rest and not go out jogging. It's cold today or whatever it is. And like you say, we can have these images in our mind where I'm like, oh, I'm a person that wants help. But our actions speak louder than our consciousness. Our actions say, what desire inside you actually has the most power today? And if you look at my life and you look at your life and say, if someone had to judge your life through the desires in your heart, what would they see your desires are? Would your desires reflect health if you want health? Would your desires reflect that you want God if you are praying to know God? Do you have actions that are seeking, searching, finding? If you want to get a job promotion or you really don't like your job, this is one that fascinates me. I can't tell you how many people I talk to that hate their job and they're not applying for other jobs. And I just go, wait a minute. How can you hate your job so badly that you'll sit here and rant about it for a while? Tell me how horrible it is. So then I ask, so you applying for their jobs? No. Why? Why aren't you applying for the jobs? We're not stuck in jobs here in our country. Or to listen to people that say, we need laws to make it so that Google can't spy on us, or that Google needs to show us, accurate things in search results and not omit information. They shouldn't be able to be biased in their search results. I say, we have 100 other search engines you can use. Have you tried any of them? Well, no. Well, why not? It literally takes a couple seconds to go to another search engine. Even Google itself will deliver results to you of other search engines. If you type in alternative search engines to Google, it will give you answers to that aren't just Google. And you can search so many different places, but then it goes back to this thing. So what is your desire? Is your strongest desire for Google to give you all information? Or is it a desire where you just want the world to have to give you what you want without any work on your part? And this goes back deeply to the war in heaven. What do your actions tell you about what you want? Do you want a world where you shape it? Do you want a world where you are a co-creator and taking part in an active development of what's taking place? Or do you simply want a world where somebody else created it? Do you just want to sit and enjoy what someone else did? Oh, someone else made the art. Someone else made the software. Someone else made the computer. Someone else gave me the search results. Someone else told me how to think. What are your actions telling you? Because in the war in heaven, what Satan offered was a world where you didn't have to think. You didn't have to take risk. You didn't have to try. You didn't have to exercise agency. The exercise of agency presupposes that you have a desire, something you want that you are now choosing to pursue. Taking away agency takes away those desires as well, takes away responsibility. And it's one of complete power to Satan, where he tells us what we need. We rejected that in the war in heaven, those of us that came here. We came here to live a life where we choose our future. That's the identity within us. That's who we are. We didn't come to be told how to think, how to act, how to do, how to be. And yet, when it's offered to us by the world, it's super convenient. It helps us. It makes our life easier, more convenient, faster, cheaper, whatever it is. And so we find ourselves saying the government should make a law that requires that Google stop censoring its search engines. And I look at that and again think that's a reflection on us. That's a reflection on what desire inside us has the strongest and most firmly rooted hold in us. And the fascinating thing about us as humans is that it's rare that the desire that's strongest inside of us is actually in our consciousness. We don't consciously recognize most of our controlling desires. We instead allow them to operate. We rationalize, we justify, we make excuses. Oh, I'll start exercising tomorrow. Oh, it's the holidays, I can eat extra. Oh, I put a little time into research during the election. I've done my part. It's real easy to rationalize. But then at that point, we have to ask, is it me? Did this law pass because I just sat by and watched? Or didn't watch? I wasn't even aware. How many laws have passed with us completely unaware? I know so many people that check out of politics that say, I don't do politics anymore, it's too ugly. I just checked out. Yeah, I'm sure it's ugly. If you're not a part of it, it will be uglier, right? How do we expect to make politics good if we all check out of it? That makes no sense to me. But we do it often. And then we say, yeah, that's their fault. But is it? We contribute to these things. We contribute, we impact them. That's the role of faith. That's the role of creation. That's the identity and the destiny that God's given us. We're creators. We shape our future. We shape who we are. We shape those around us. We shape the world around us. We don't control it. We can't dictate every solution, but we can shape and we can leave our mark on the world for good or for bad. And if we're willing to work and exercise faith and be creators, then we are shaping the world around us. If we're not proactive, then the question, is it me, really has weight and impact. It is you. It is me. If we're not doing our part, we need to actively contribute, exercise that faith and actively contribute. And it's fascinating to look at our own lives and realize all the ways that we may check out, all the ways where we may just want to be told the answer or the solution. But instead, we need to pray for this desire to grow in us, the desire to be a creator, the desire to shape, the desire to set a course for something. Let's start impacting our future. Let's start determining what it will be, because we'll arrive there at some point. All our futures are ahead of us, and the future that we allow to be shaped based on the desires inside of us will meet one day. And for some of us, it'll be a great future. For others of us, it'll be sad, it'll be depressing, it'll be miserable to realize we're reaping what we sowed. And then again, desires don't speak to our consciousness as much because they like to justify, they like to rationalize. And my desire to be healthy often gets excused. I always have an excuse not to exercise again. and I have to change that desire to make it the stronger desire, stronger than the desire for ice cream or for rest or for entertainment, and just go sacrifice to make that happen. Michael, any final thoughts as we wrap up the podcast today?
Yeah, one thing I would say that I've done in my life to try to figure out my desires is to look at my actions. That usually tells me what it is that I desire. And if I went through a day or a week and I just kind of documented how I spent my time, I didn't make any changes. I just did what I would do, and then I wrote down what I was doing during certain times of the day. And then when I look back on it, I was kind of embarrassed. Like, wow, wasted a whole lot of time. Like, just doing things that didn't amount to much of anything, weren't impactful, weren't helpful to me, weren't helpful to my family. And so that kind of reflected to me where my desires were. I say things like, I want to help my family, or I say things like, I want to impact my community. And then I look at the way I spent my time, and I said, well, my actions and my words don't line up. That kind of makes me a hypocrite. Um, Not kind of, it does. That's the definition. And so for me to be able to understand my desires, it was just helpful to look at the way I spent my time and to write that down and then to try to decide how to change it. And that's an activity I do a lot, actually, because I find myself slipping back or finding new ways to waste time or do things that are not really productive. And it's a constant reminder to me of where my desires should be, at least where I want. It's kind of a funny thing. I want my desires to be a certain way. And so I try to look at the way I spend my time and change it to reflect more of what I feel that I desire. I think at the end of my life, if I don't change my actions the way I'm talking about, then I'll look back and feel like I didn't accomplish the things I wanted to accomplish. And that's a desire I have, is to not feel that way. I want to be able to look back and say, yeah, I tried to do good things with my time. I tried to be impactful. And so I think that desire, I'm trying to let that desire fuel what I do every day. What decisions do I make? What do I do with my time? So that I try to be a creator in the world, to make a difference around me. And so that's just one way I think you can try to analyze your own desires, is to view what you do every day, what your actions are, what activities you do.
Yeah, and I think it's a great check for each of us. I go back to the law since I'm an attorney, and I think someone asked me the question once: if someone accused you of being this, would there be enough evidence to convict you? And I think about that. If you were accused of being a football fan, what kind of evidence would there be to convict you? If you were accused of being someone that desired help, what kind of evidence would there be to convict you? These come from our actions, and our actions shape and really are determined. We take actions based on what we want. And it's interesting to me, just as maybe a final thought as we talk, a lot of the political world believes that there's this massive groups of misinformed people, people that don't have correct facts and information. And they're working to say, we've got to combat this, the false facts that are out there, false narratives, and all these people vote for this one person because they don't know the truth or whatever. And people often talk about the uninformed masses and those that just vote without any knowledge. But I've really reflected on that, and even with running for Attorney General this last year in Utah, I don't feel that the majority of voters are voting out of ignorance. But I also don't feel that facts are radically changing what many of the people are voting for and not voting for. And this goes again a little bit deeper. What is it that's fueling the decision? I believe it's our desires, ultimately. We vote for the people we vote for because there's something that comes from it, something we get, um, something we want, even. And there's different pieces that work inside of us, and I don't think we're all conscious fully of what these desires are and how they're working in us. But just like the desire, just like I have a desire for health, but then I don't do much to be healthy because of competing desires, so too I may desire certain things for my country in my conscious mind, but my actions are being chosen by other desires that I have. And I think if you sit down and you evaluate, to your point, Michael, your life through a lens of what are my actions? What are the things I listen to? What are the quote facts that I will digest or sort through? They give insight into what's really operating inside of us, what's controlling and dictating so many of our things. And I strongly believe that right now, America doesn't really desire truth. It's not a strong, compelling desire, this pursuit of truth, as much as they desire more power or ease or prosperity or different things. And they're in a conflict with people around them, and they elect leaders that, in a sense, feed that conflict. And again, these leaders in America's current state is a reflection on who we are inside. To change that, we don't have to change every person in America. We need to change ourselves. We need to start desiring truth. That alone includes a lot of changes to our life. But as we do that and as we make those changes and we allow that pursuit of truth to become our strongest desire, our actions change based on that. Truth becomes relevant. Facts become relevant. We start to understand more and more things and to see things. But we won't accept the truth. We won't even listen to the facts, the quote facts that are out there, unless we desire those, unless we desire to know. Then we'll search, we'll research, we'll refine, we'll review, and go through these things. And so when we hear us or others or the media talk about uninformed people, maybe what we're hearing is people that are making decisions that differ from the stated goals or desires of another group. And maybe as humans, we're making decisions not based as much on facts, but on desires, on feelings. And again, that makes sense from this perspective of agency. Agency is the exercise of a desire. We want something, therefore we act. If I want the light on, I go stand up and flip the switch. And my actions are all tied back to a desire. And again, knowledge, I may know that this ice cream is bad for me, and I still eat it because I desired something more than even the knowledge of the truth associated with whatever situation I'm in. And so we have to understand this deep connection that our desires drive so much of what we do. We can change our desires, we can feed good desires, we can educate our desires, but we have to be intentional about it. It's part of this existence in this life. So Michael, any final thoughts before we conclude for the day?
No, I think you've summed it up. That when we look at the world around us, it's kind of a reflection of us and our desires, particularly things close to us. And if we want to make a change, we usually have to look at ourselves and say, maybe it's me.
Maybe it's me. I invite you to ask that question as you listen to that this week. Maybe it's me. Reflect on that and think about how that can empower you to make some changes in your life, in relationships, in your family, in your community, in your nation, any of those things, and go from there. So thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to talking with you more on our next episode as well.